everyone, Novels Wonderland here. Thank you all for the love and support you've shown me and the channel.
Naruto Path to Godhood, Chapter 484 to 495, 484. A risky audience. 1139 words. The three envoys came, and left just as quickly. When they arrived, they brought a large supply of resources. When they departed, they carried with them the promise of a demigod. The mission had been completed successfully, and everyone involved was satisfied. Night slowly settled in, and the steady rain tapped against the attic roof, creating a tense and restless atmosphere, as if a storm was about to break. Through the rain, three figures approached the outskirts of Amigakure. If we enter Amigakure like this, there is no guarantee Hanzo will not attack us, Nagato said, his voice filled with concern. He had been the first to oppose this plan back in the cave. No matter what, this land was still under Hanzo's rule and name. Even if his control had weakened, Akatsuki remained an unauthorized organization. Acting freely outside the village was one thing, but walking directly into Amigakure felt like stepping into a trap. If they were careless, they could easily end up dead. Yes, we should think of another way, Conan added, trying to persuade him. Still, she already knew it was pointless. Everyone had tried to stop Yahiko back at their base. Even the usually composed Iota had nearly lost his calm, almost dropping to his knees to beg Yahiko not to go. It was like watching someone walk straight into danger, fully aware of the risks, yet refusing to turn back. Wiping the rain from his face, Yahiko spoke with quiet confidence, "Our organization is still small. We are no threat to Hanzo's rule, so he has no reason to act against us." He paused briefly before continuing, "Besides, the land of rain is in crisis. If we stand by and do nothing, it would betray the purpose behind Akatsuki's creation." Hearing this, Nagato and Conan fell silent. Yahiko was their pillar. No matter what decision he made, they would follow him without hesitation. The three of them stepped into Amigakure, and it did not take long before several rain shinobi appeared, blocking their path. "Identify yourselves. Please inform Lord Hanzo that the leader of Akatsuki wishes to meet him to discuss matters concerning the future of the Land of Rain," Yahiko said calmly. The guard let out a mocking scoff. "You think you can see Lord Hanzo just because you ask? Get lost before we make you." Akatsuki was still in its early stages. While it had gathered some members, it had not yet gained recognition. To the Rain Shinobi, the name carried no weight. Yahiko and the others remained where they stood. The guard's expression darkened. "Still not leaving?" At his command, more than a dozen Rain Shinobi appeared from the shadows, surrounding the trio. Yahiko frowned slightly, but his composure did not waver. "What is the meaning of this?" No one answered. Instead, a barrage of shuriken and kunai was launched toward them. Clang, clang, clang. Conan brought her hands together, and sheets of paper formed a large shield in front of them, blocking every incoming weapon. The attack did not stop there. Several Rain Shinobi quickly formed hand seals, and flames surged forward, engulfing the area. Water style, water formation wall. Nagato exhaled a powerful stream of water, which spread out and rose into a wide defensive barrier, extinguishing the flames. The Rain Shinobi prepared another round of jutsu, but Yahiko was faster. Wind style, pressure damage. A powerful gust of wind surged outward, sweeping through the battlefield like a moving wall. The force knocked most of the Rain Shinobi off their feet. Despite the overwhelming power, the attack had been carefully controlled. None of them were seriously injured. Yahiko lowered his hand and looked at them steadily. "Can you report our request now?" One of the fallen shinobi clenched his teeth and glared at him. "Wait here." He had initially intended to call for reinforcements, but after witnessing their strength and restraint, he reconsidered and chose to pass the message along instead. Though he could not meet Hanzo himself, the information was quickly relayed upward. Inside a dimly lit room, Hanzo sat in seiza on a tatami mat, his expression thoughtful. Akatsuki. He seemed unfamiliar with the name. Standing beside him, Kazama spoke, "It is a recently formed organization. Their stated goal is peace, and they often assist civilians." Kazama served as Hanzo's right-hand man, and handled most reports. He had heard of Akatsuki before, but it had seemed too insignificant to mention. After all, countless groups formed and disbanded in the Land of Rain every day. There were even dozens using the name Akatsuki alone. Since it was just another small organization claiming to pursue peace, Kazama had not considered it worth reporting. Hanzo raised an eyebrow slightly. So there are still such idealistic shinobi in this land. Seeking peace, just like me. A faint smirk appeared on his face. Are they here to join me? At a time like this, he had use for capable individuals. Not exactly, Kazama replied, forcing a polite smile. Their leader, Yahiko, says he wishes to discuss the future of the Land of Rain with you. Hanzo's expression immediately turned cold. Discuss the future of the Land of Rain. Ridiculous. He waved his hand dismissively. Send them away. Tell them I am not in the village. Kazama hesitated. Hanzo's gaze sharpened. What is it? After a brief pause, Kazama spoke carefully. I have heard they are disciples of Jiraiya. The name made Hanzo pause. Jiraiya. After your battle years ago, Jiraiya remained in the Land of Rain for 2 years, teaching war orphans ninjutsu. Hanzo's expression softened slightly as memories resurfaced. So they are his students. Back then, whether out of respect for their potential or caution toward Konoha, he had spared those 3 children. Now they had grown into shinobi capable of standing on their own. Hearing the name of one of the legendary Sannin always stirred a sense of pride in him. After all, it was he who had given them that title. Still, he knew the truth. If those 3 joined forces again, even he might not be able to defeat them. But that raised another question. If these were Jiraiya's students, and Jiraiya himself was a disciple of the 3rd Hokage, then could Akatsuki's visit carry Konoha's intentions? Hanzo's mind began to race. Though tensions with Konoha were rising, they had not yet reached the point of open conflict. If Konoha offered enough, alliances could still shift. That was the nature of the shinobi world, where loyalty was fragile and everything revolved around benefit and self-interest. After a moment of thought, Hanzo spoke. In that case, let them in. A faint, curious smile appeared beneath his mask. I would like to see what kind of individuals have been taken in as students by Jiraiya. Chapter 485, 485, The Rain's Reality 1331 words. Inside the attic, Hanzo remained seated on the tatami, a scroll held loosely in his hand. Yahiko, Nagato, and Konan stood to the side, ignored as if they were nothing more than insignificant subordinates. This was not their first time seeing him. Years ago, during the battle between the legendary Sannin of Konoha and the so-called demigod, the 3 of them had been caught at the edge of the battlefield. If Nagato had not awakened his power in that moment, they would not have survived. Since that day, Yahiko had come to understand that Nagato possessed a rare ability, one that allowed his strength to surge dramatically under extreme conditions. What once seemed like weakness could transform into overwhelming power in an instant. Hanzo finally broke the silence after a long pause. So, what is it that brings you here to see this old man? He did not lift his head. His eyes remained fixed on the scroll, his lack of respect obvious. Yahiko did not show anger. He stepped forward calmly. I hope Lord Hanzo will stop the war. The Land of Rain cannot endure any more suffering. Hanzo's brow furrowed slightly, but he said nothing. Yahiko clenched his fists, then dropped to his knees. I do not want to see this land fall into war again. I do not want people to suffer, and I do not want more children to become orphans. I am begging you. Only then did Hanzo look up, his gaze settling on the kneeling youth. And if I stop the war, what then? Yahiko raised his head and spoke without hesitation. Then we will restore order in the Land of Rain, improve the lives of the people, and eliminate the rogue shinobi who threaten stability. Akatsuki will support you with everything we have. These were not empty words. They were plans he, Nagato, and Konan had carefully discussed. Hanzo listened, but his expression gradually turned disappointed. This was not what he wanted to hear. And then? He asked again. Yahiko hesitated. Is that not enough? Hanzo glanced at him, his tone turning heavier. Do you truly believe that is enough? He set the scroll aside and continued. Do you know of the agreement Konoha forced upon us after the last Great War? I have heard a little, Yahiko replied. As the Five Kage summit drew closer, more details about those agreements had begun to spread. Hanzo's voice grew colder. The reparations alone will bind the land of rain for 200 years. That is only the beginning. He continued, listing each restriction one by one. The largest mines in our land are controlled by the Land of Fire. Trade is dictated by them. Even the missions our shinobi accept cannot extend beyond our borders without consequence. He looked directly at Yahiko. Under such conditions, do you still think your plan is enough? Yahiko was stunned. He had never imagined the situation was this severe. In Jiraiya-sensei's stories, Konoha had always been just and honorable. It was a place Yahiko had admired. But reality was far more complicated. Even so, Yahiko began. Hanzo cut him off. Even so, war should not happen, is that what you wish to say? His voice carried authority, pressing down on Yahiko. Without war, how do you intend to break these chains? Even great villages like Sunagakure and Iwagakure resort to conflict to ease their internal struggles. Do you believe a small nation like ours has a better option? Yahiko clenched his teeth. But all of this began because you chose to start that war. The room instantly grew tense. Watch your words, Kazama snapped from the corner. Hanzo raised a hand, stopping him. He stood slowly, his presence becoming heavier. You believe all of the Land of Rain's suffering is because of me? A faint laugh escaped him. I once thought the same way you do. I believed that if I unified this land, it would finally know peace. His voice lowered. But I was wrong. The Land of Rain lies between three great nations. Our land is small, our resources limited. If we want to grow, conflict becomes unavoidable. He continued, naming the surrounding nations. We cannot provoke the great powers. But weaker countries such as the Land of Rivers or the Land of Grass cannot resist us. Yet every time we attempt to expand, the great nations intervene. He paused. To break that cycle, I chose to enter the last Great War. His expression darkened. And we lost. Silence filled the room. Since then, I have come to understand something, Hanzo said slowly. The true source of suffering in this world is not me, but the system created by the great nations. He spoke of the structure established long ago, where power was concentrated in a handful of dominant countries, leaving smaller nations trapped between them. They maintain this balance to serve their own interests. As long as that system exists, the Land of Rain will never truly be free. Yahiko could not respond. Everything he believed in began to waver. He had always thought peace alone would bring prosperity. That understanding one another would be enough. Now those beliefs felt fragile. Hanzo returned to his seat and looked at them again. I will ask you once more. Did you come here on Konoha's behalf? Yahiko shook his head. We are Jiraiya-sensei's students, but this has nothing to do with him or Konoha. We came here of our own will. Hanzo's interest vanished. Akatsuki was too small to matter. Without ties to Konoha, they held no value to him. I have nothing more to say, he replied coldly. If you want to stop this war, then persuade Konoha to erase the agreements imposed on the Land of Rain. He took a sip of tea before continuing. The current commander on their front lines is known as the Yellow Flash, a student of Orochimaru. Given the connection between Orochimaru and Jiraiya, perhaps they will listen to you. Yahiko said nothing more. He turned and left with Nagato and Konan. Nagato's long red hair covered his face, hiding any change in his expression. To Hanzo, they were nothing more than idealistic youths. If not for the assumption that they might represent Konoha, he would never have met them at all. Lord, they have left, Kazama said, kneeling as he entered. What is your opinion? Hanzo asked. Kazama thought carefully before answering. It does not seem connected to Konoha. Yahiko is simply. Hanzo narrowed his eyes. You sympathize with them? Kazama lowered his head immediately. I only thought they are still shinobi of this land. Perhaps they could be of use. Hanzo let out a faint scoff. They have courage, but they lack understanding. And they are Jiraiya's students. That alone makes them unsuitable. Kazama remained silent, though cold sweat ran down his back. Hanzo observed him briefly, then spoke again, more casually. Keep an eye on them. Young shinobi often act on impulse, driven by ideals. That makes them easy to manipulate. Kazama felt a chill. Your meaning, Lord? Hanzo gave a faint smile. If you discover anyone secretly supporting Akatsuki, have Watanabe and his men seize those supplies. Watanabe was known as a rogue shinobi, but in truth, he remained loyal to Hanzo. The Land of Rain was filled with hidden forces from many nations. As its leader, Hanzo could not act openly in many situations. So he relied on others to handle what needed to be done in the shadows. I understand, Kazama replied, then withdrew. Left alone, Hanzo did not return to his scroll. Instead, he sat in silence, lost in thought. This time, would the Land of Rain rise? Or fall even deeper into despair? I'll drop one bonus chapter for every 10 reviews. Leave a review/comment. One bonus chapter will be released for every 100 power stones. Read 80-100 chapters ahead on P at Trian. Chapter 486, 486. Konoha signs peace. 12-19 words. The Land of Rain's full-scale offensive began slightly later than Hanzo's declaration of war. He only started deploying his shinobi slowly after securing enough resources, and making sure Konoha had no intention of asking for peace. Conflicts like this between large and small nations, and even tension among allies, were nothing new. Still, that delay gave Konoha valuable time to prepare. That small amount of time was far more important than it sounded. With the mobility of shinobi, it was enough for Konoha's forces stationed in the Land of Waves to return and reinforce the homeland. There was only one thing to say in situations like this. Hesitation leads to defeat. Of course, acting decisively could also mean giving everything away too quickly. In July of year 38, the forces led by Hayashi and Tsukumo had already crossed the central region of the Land of Fire and stopped near the border of the Land of Rain. Before they began the next stage of deployment, Koharu sent Hayashi a letter containing urgent news. Konoha and the Hidden Mist Village had officially signed an armistice agreement. The agreement contained several important terms. First, the Hidden Mist would surrender unconditionally to Konoha. From the day the agreement was signed, both sides would cease all hostilities, and the Hidden Mist was forbidden from provoking Konoha in any way. Second, all Konoha prisoners captured during the war had to be returned, and the same rule applied in the opposite direction. However, items considered war trophies, such as legendary weapons, were excluded. Third, both sides would establish an alliance. During the Third Great Ninja War, the Hidden Mist would be obligated to assist Konoha in resisting the Hidden Cloud Village. Fourth, the Land of Water would completely open its borders. Trade between the two nations would be restored, Konoha shinobi would be allowed to accept missions in the Land of Water, and the commercial agreement originally signed with the Third Mizukage would be reinstated. Fifth, the Land of Water would pay war reparations to the Land of Fire. Naturally, the agreement contained more details than that. Koharu had only written down the most urgent points. The first two conditions were expected. A defeated nation had no choice but to accept them. The third point, however, was clearly just empty words. The hidden mist could barely defend itself right now, so there was no way it could send forces to help Konoha fight the hidden cloud village. If they had that strength, they would never have surrendered in the first place. The most valuable part of the entire agreement was probably the fourth condition. Opening the land of water to trade was basically using war to break through their isolation. But from another point of view, it was also beneficial to both sides. This had already been discussed when the third Mizukage visited Konoha years earlier, but later events had delayed the plan. Right now, Konoha was still at war, so it had no time to take advantage of it. That part of the agreement was clearly meant for after the war ended. Hayashi did not fully trust the hidden mist to keep that promise for long. If the next Mizukage was reasonable, the agreement might continue. But if something went wrong inside the village, the situation could change completely. The only real benefit at the moment was the war compensation. Even then, the third Hokage did not demand too much. He did not repeat the mistake of the Second Great Ninja War by forcing the enemy to pay endless reparations for decades. If Tsunagakure and Iwagakure had signed an agreement like this back then, the Third Great Ninja War might not have started so soon. Overall, Konoha's terms were surprisingly generous. It did not even feel like a treaty forced on a defeated nation. Instead, it looked more like a cooperative agreement. The third Hokage had clearly learned from the past. He was afraid that pushing too hard would only create another war in the future. It was not that he feared war itself. But the Land of Fire did not lack resources, and it had no reason to continue fighting just for pride. Hayashi showed the contents of the agreement to Tsukumo. That was the advantage of having connections at the top. Important information always reached him faster than anyone else. The Sannin probably already knew about it, but someone like Tsukumo would normally only hear about it much later. Tsukumo did not react strongly after reading the letter. To him, the only thing that mattered was the battlefield. As long as shinobi continued to carry out missions and fight, the village's internal matters could be left to the higher-ups. Tsukumo was an extremely straightforward person. Danzo, however, did not feel the same way. Far away in the land of hot springs, he was furious. As someone who believed in absolute strength, he wanted to strip the hidden mist of everything they had. But there was nothing he could do. He was in charge of another front line, and the negotiations were completely outside his control. Even when he wrote letters back to the village, the third Hokage ignored his suggestions. That made him even more frustrated. He had not earned much military merit recently, and his influence inside the village was slowly slipping away. That was a very dangerous situation for him. Minato even mentioned in one of his letters that Danzo openly criticized the third Hokage during a war meeting, saying he was being too soft, and was practically giving away the village's victory. The two men who had once worked closely together now had completely different political views. Once again, Hayashi realized how useful connections were. Because he had acquaintances in almost every battlefield, he could always receive first-hand information faster than anyone else. In any case, the issue with the Land of Water was finally settled. Summer was extremely hot, and even at night the air still felt heavy. Inside the main tent, Hayashi, Tsukumo, and Shikumo were discussing their next plan of action. For now, they would not enter the Land of Rain. Hanzo had chosen a very traditional strategy for this war against Konoha. Instead of launching a direct attack, he was using small squads to sabotage Konoha's supply routes. Konoha had originally been fighting on 4 fronts. Now it was reduced to 3, but every remaining battlefield was located outside the Land of Fire. Some supply lines stretched all the way to the Land of Wind. Compared to that, the Land of Rain was right next to Konoha's territory. For the Rain Shinobi, those long supply routes were practically targets waiting to be destroyed. With help from their allies, the Rain village had already gathered detailed intelligence about Konoha's supply network. The important points and weak areas were all clearly known. Shinobi did not rely on supplies as much as ordinary soldiers, but they still needed food and medical support. Without medicine, wounded shinobi would quickly lose their ability to fight. If the supply routes were cut, Konoha, which was already outnumbered, would fall into an even worse situation. Because of that, the rain shinobi had to be cleared out of the land of fire first. Only then could Konoha safely advance into the land of rain. Chapter 487, 487, Counterattack against the rain. 1151 words. Strictly speaking, the land of rain was carrying out a large-scale infiltration operation aimed entirely at destroying Konoha's logistics network. Every village used this kind of strategy at some point, but the frightening part was that the rain village did not need to worry about anything else. Their only task was to sabotage Konoha's supply lines, nothing more. That alone was enough to create enormous pressure. Konoha's supply routes were stretched too far, and because of the lack of manpower, the number of shinobi protecting them was limited. Before the land of rain entered the war, Iwagakure and Sunagakure could not bypass Konoha's frontline camps to strike the supply routes inside the land of fire. Back then, the weakness existed, but no one was able to take advantage of it. Now everything was different. Once the land of rain declared war, the weak points in those supply lines became the main target, and the danger would only grow larger with time. The importance of supply routes had already been proven long ago. During the later stage of the Third Great Ninja War, Iwagakure lost a huge advantage because the Canopy Bridge was destroyed. Minato used the Flying Thunder God technique to infiltrate deep into the land of Earth and distract the enemy, while Kakashi's team destroyed the bridge and completely cut off Iwagakure's supply route. Compared to that situation, Konoha did not have a single weak point as obvious as Canopy Bridge. However, according to the latest intelligence, the Rain Village planned to divide its forces into small teams. Depending on the mission, they would operate in 4-man, 3-man, or even 2-man squads. That made Hanzo's intentions very clear. He was preparing for a long guerrilla war. Whether he wanted to preserve his strength or avoid a direct confrontation did not matter. For Konoha, it was terrible news. The land of fire was completely different from the land of wind. Forests were everywhere. If the rain shinobi hid inside those forests, tracking them down would be extremely difficult. Even if they could not defeat you directly, they could keep harassing you endlessly until the situation became unbearable. For Hayashi and the others, the priority was obvious. They had to clear the enemy out of their territory and protect the supply lines at all costs. According to current intelligence, the Rain Village had deployed around 2,000 shinobi. Hanzo could not leave his village undefended, so this was likely the maximum number he could send out. Inside the main tent, Tsukumo looked at Hayashi and Shikumo and spoke calmly. If we eliminate these forces, Hanzo will have no choice but to withdraw from the war. Hayashi nodded. The logic was simple, but carrying it out would not be easy. As they had already discussed, Hanzo clearly intended to rely on guerrilla tactics rather than open battle. At the same time, the number of shinobi under Hayashi and Tsukumo was not very large either. Nearly half of their forces had already returned to the village to strengthen Konoha's internal defenses. That decision was not only because of the chaos in the Hidden Mist village, but also because the Rain village had already begun sending small teams deep into the land of fire. The strength of small shinobi squads should never be underestimated. If left unchecked, they could easily carry out important missions that might change the course of the war, or even launch direct assassination attempts. If Konoha did not strengthen its defenses, Hanzo might suddenly lead 2,000 shinobi straight toward the village itself. Strangely enough, aside from the land of water, the land of rain had become the second country to push the battlefield directly into the land of fire during this war. Hanzo had already turned the entire situation inside the land of fire upside down. We currently have 6 supply routes, Tsukumo continued, pointing at the map. But in reality, they all fall into 2 main directions. If Hanzo splits his forces, we will have to do the same. Shikumo nodded and leaned closer to the map. Every reconnaissance unit must be deployed as well, he said, marking several locations. Each sector needs eyes watching it at all times. On the map of the land of fire, the supply lines had been divided into multiple sectors. The new operational plan focused entirely on reconnaissance. Konoha had been able to win several wars largely because of three advantages: strong logistics, an advanced medical system, and a large number of skilled reconnaissance shinobi. Right now, Hayashi and Tsukumo had a significant number of reconnaissance shinobi under their command, and that was their biggest advantage. The plan itself is not the problem, Tsukumo said quietly. The real problem is still Hanzo. His expression became more serious. No matter how confident he was, Hanzo was still a shinobi who could stand on equal footing with the third Hokage. Tsukumo could not claim that he would definitely win in a direct fight. But the most troublesome part was that Hanzo might not fight directly at all. He was skilled with a blade, proficient in fire release, and possessed one of the most terrifying weapons on the battlefield, poison gas. Someone like him could cause massive casualties in a very short time. That was exactly why the Sannin had once risked everything just to stop him from entering the battlefield. Once Hanzo joined a large-scale battle, the entire front line could collapse almost instantly. On top of that, his body flicker technique was extremely fast. If he focused on harassment instead of direct combat, the disruption he could cause would be only slightly weaker than Minato's Flying Thunder God technique. Hayashi thought for a moment before speaking. Tracking Hanzo's position can be left to Shibi. He and Shibi had known each other since their time at the Ninja Academy. Shibi was the kind of person who rarely attracted attention, but his abilities were far from ordinary. His insect techniques were useful in both offense and defense, but more importantly, they were perfect for long-distance reconnaissance and tracking. In certain situations, his abilities were even more practical than the Byakugan. He could also use different insects for support roles such as treatment, detoxification, and helping wounds heal faster. That made Shibi one of the rare shinobi who could handle reconnaissance, combat, and support all at once. The only problem was that he was far too low profile. Most people in the village had no idea how strong he really was. Objectively speaking, the Aburame clan had always been extremely good at hiding their strength. Even so, Hayashi trusted him completely. If anyone could find Hanzo before he struck again, it would be Shibi. I'll drop one bonus chapter for every 10 reviews. Leave a review/comment. One bonus chapter will be released for every 100 power stones. Read 80-100 chapters ahead on P at Trian. Chapter 488, 488, Selling Watermelon for Merit. 1183 words. When I found Shibi, he was gathered with Nawaki and the others. Back then, Hayashi had beaten students across multiple grades to earn ninja points. Nawaki had followed behind just to watch the excitement, stirring things up and provoking people wherever he went. Even though they were not from the same class, they were all familiar with each other. The Jonin circle was not large. Every year, new ninjas graduated, but many died on missions or the battlefield. Especially after 2 shinobi world wars, those lacking either strength or luck had already been eliminated. So even without much prior interaction, most of them knew each other. As time passed, the number of surviving comrades only grew smaller. Among them, most were from ninja clans. Civilians who could reach Jonin at around 20 years old were extremely rare. People like Minato and Orochimaru were exceptional talents, almost impossible to replicate across the entire ninja world. Jiraiya had started out as one of the weakest in his class, but he had a great teacher and later gained support from Mount Myaboku. Those were the key reasons he rose to prominence. In short, the paths of those 3 were unique. No one else could easily follow in their footsteps. At that moment, everyone was discussing what to eat for lunch. The base had just been established, and although battle plans were already drawn, they had not yet been issued. For now, everyone had time to relax. In a few days, that would no longer be the case. Even though they were on the front lines, smiles were still common, and their tone carried a sense of ease. It made sense. The land of water had already ended its war, and now, with the momentum of victory, they were facing the weaker land of rain. No one believed this would be a difficult battle. Moreover, they had all become special Jonin, or Jonin, at a young age. During the Second Shinobi World War, they had been inexperienced, but after surviving 2 wars, each of them now possessed their own strengths. This was their time to replace the older generation and stand on their own. Just as Hayashi was feeling satisfied, Inuzuka Gaku, who had once confessed to Kushina and been firmly rejected, looked around before pulling out more than a dozen watermelons from a sealing scroll. For a moment, Hayashi was stunned, as if he had returned to his days at the Ninja Academy. In the heat of summer, watermelon was a rare treat. But on the battlefield, it created a strange sense of mismatch. Were these people a bit too relaxed? Inuzuka Gaku smiled and said, "If you want some watermelon, exchange it with merit points." On the battlefield, missions were not paid like in the village. Instead, completing missions earned merit points. These could be exchanged for advanced ninjutsu or scrolls, or simply converted into money. Merit points were the true currency here. At first, Hayashi thought Gaku was joking. But judging from how practiced he was, it was clear he had done this many times. Hayashi could not help but feel impressed. Inuzuka Gaku had a sharp sense for business. Even Nawaki, who was usually stingy, glanced at the watermelon and stepped closer. Gaku grinned. 500 merit points for one. Nawaki rolled his eyes. 500 merit points could be exchanged for a C-rank ninjutsu. The price was outrageous. What is this, gold-coated rind or gold seeds? Gaku shrugged. Limited stock. Price goes up. Nawaki looked conflicted. Half of his merit points had to go to Tsunade, and another portion was given to Nono. He only had a small amount left for himself. No matter who Nawaki might end up with in the future, for now, he had already gone quite far down the path of respecting women. He patted one of the watermelons. "Are you sure it is ripe?" "I sell watermelons, not stones," Gaku replied. Hayashi felt his eyelid twitch. For a second, Nawaki's hand moving toward his pocket looked like he might pull out a kunai and start trouble. Fortunately, he only knocked on the melon before choosing one that weighed about 7 or 8 pounds. "Cut it open." Hayashi nodded and formed hand seals, condensing a small wind blade. With a few precise cuts, the watermelon split cleanly into over a dozen pieces. The display drew admiration from the surrounding ninjas. For many, controlling wind nature chakra with such precision at such close range was extremely difficult. After splitting the watermelon, Nawaki handed a piece to Hayashi, took one for himself, and shared the rest. As Hayashi ate, he asked, "This must have cost you quite a bit." Nawaki smiled. "It is worth it. Why is he even selling these?" Hayashi glanced at Gaku. "Family business," Nawaki said after thinking for a moment. That likely meant another story of someone destined to inherit a trade if they failed as a ninja. Most clans had side businesses. The Nara clan, for example, raised deer to supply medicinal materials to Konoha Hospital. So this was not unusual. Dai, who had opened weapon shops with Hayashi's funding, hoped that Guy would at least become a chunin. That way, another son could inherit the business. After all, supplying Konoha with weapons like kunai and explosive tags was both profitable and honorable. The Uchiha clan, however, had little interest in such trades. They possessed significant wealth already, including mineral resources accumulated since the founding of the village. Hayashi had learned that the clan owned numerous deposits. If he ever became clan head, those resources would naturally remain within the clan. After finishing the watermelon, Hayashi did not join the others for a meal. Instead, he called Shibi aside. Many eyes followed his movements. As the frontline commander and someone with a growing reputation, his actions attracted attention. Still, everyone present was a jonin, so there was no concern about spies. Most assumed it was related to a mission. After greeting each other, Hayashi got straight to the point. "The rain ninjas are scattered across the land of fire. Our main task is to drive them out." Shibi adjusted his sunglasses, a rare hint of excitement crossing his face. It was as if he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. But the expression quickly faded, replaced by doubt. For reconnaissance, the Hyuga clan is already leading their team. Whether I am there or not should not matter. The Byakugan has a maximum range of about 1 kilometer, Hayashi said. Its tracking ability is limited. Tracking. Shibi repeated, catching the key word. You want me to infiltrate Amigakure and investigate Hanzo. He adjusted his glasses again, as if trying to hide himself within his coat. Fortunately, Hayashi shook his head. There is no need to enter the land of rain. That would be too dangerous. Shibi visibly relaxed. Just track their movements within the land of fire. Shibi fell silent. Hayashi patted his shoulder with a faint smile. I trust you can handle it. After all, with great power comes great responsibility. Chapter 489, 489, Eliminating Rain Ninja Squads. Is Hanzo dangerous? Of course he is. Even the combined strength of the young Sannin could not defeat him. Shibi, as he is now, does not even possess half of their strength from back then. If he were to face Hanzo directly, he would likely be defeated in an instant. Fortunately, Shibi does not need to confront him head-on. His task is to rely on long-range tracking through his insects and determine Hanzo's location. Once that is done, others will take over. But does that make it safe? Not at all. There is a simple rule for survival, especially for those who rely on small, fragile creatures. You must detect the predator before it detects you. If not, you end up as nothing more than a quick meal. In that sense, Shibi is like the insects he commands, while Hanzo stands at the very top of the shinobi world. Following that logic, Shibi should be safe. But theory and reality are not the same. Sometimes, even if you notice your opponent first, it does not guarantee survival. Hanzo's body flicker technique is exceptional. In terms of speed alone, Shibi cannot compare. So Shibi set out but not alone. Although his combat ability is respectable, he is facing someone known as a demigod. He needed dependable support. He brought along Inazuka Gaku, mainly for his Ninken, and Hyuga Hizashi joined as well. Hizashi had a somewhat rough personality and a sharp temper, but he was still well regarded. At the very least, when taking on a mission with extremely high risk, Shibi did not forget him. As for matters back home, there was no time to worry about them now. The three departed with determination, accompanied by a Ninken, several watermelons, and countless insects, disappearing into the vast forest. Before leaving, Hayashi provided them with antidotes prepared by Nono, specifically designed to counter the poison of Hanzo's salamander. With such preparation, the only thing they lacked was someone capable of matching Hanzo in direct combat. Unfortunately, there were only two such individuals in the camp, Hayashi and Tsukumo. Both were commanders responsible for larger operations and could not act as escorts. All that remained was to trust in their ability and luck. Their mission was critical and would influence the direction of the war. But before that, Konoha still had to eliminate the hidden rain forces within the Land of Fire. As the conflict spread deeper, battles reached areas that had never seen war before. A small nation invading a great one was unprecedented, and from the beginning, it drew the attention of the entire shinobi world. The outcome would affect the balance of power everywhere. By the end of August, the war had already lasted over a month. At that time, within a dense forest in the Land of Fire, more than a dozen figures moved rapidly and appeared at the edge of the woods. From their attire, they were clearly shinobi from Amigakure. Beyond this forest is Konoha's supply route. That is our target, the leader said with a faint smile. The idea of a smaller nation striking back against a major power filled him with satisfaction. Without hesitation, he led the group into the forest. What he did not know was that Konoha shinobi were already waiting. 9 o'clock direction, 900 meters, 15 targets, moving fast, Himeji said calmly. Her eyes had fully recovered, allowing her to return to missions without any drawbacks. 15. Hayashi murmured. He rose to his feet and vanished instantly using the body flicker technique. Himeji remained where she was. Moments later, Hayashi returned, his presence carrying a faint killing intent. "It is done. Let's move." Himeji nodded, though she felt slightly unnecessary. Her role was purely reconnaissance. She glanced briefly at the moon above, recalling the Tensigan Hayashi had mentioned, then refocused. The Byakugan's detection ability was invaluable. It was no surprise that other villages had once gone to extreme lengths to obtain it. After more than a month of continuous fighting, Konoha and Rain Shinobi were locked in constant conflict. Konoha's strategy was clear: eliminate all Rain Shinobi within the Land of Fire, then push the front line toward the Land of Rain. Hayashi and Himeji were not the only ones carrying out such missions. Almost every shinobi was deployed across the region, including Sakumo. Camp operations were currently maintained by Shikumo. The next group. 30 enemies. Once Himeji confirmed their position, Hayashi disappeared again. They did not bother concealing their movements. In most cases, Himeji would detect the enemy long before they could react. Speed and awareness were enough. A kunai pierced the chest of the final enemy. Blood spilled onto the ground as dozens of Rain Shinobi lay lifeless nearby. To Hayashi, eliminating them was as simple as completing a routine task. They prepared to move again, but this time, something changed. Hayashi suddenly stopped. A falcon descended rapidly from the sky. "The camp only sends communication birds in emergencies," Himeji said, her tone tense. Hayashi extended his arm, allowing the falcon to land. He removed the scroll attached to its leg and read it. "Shibi and the others have located him. I'll drop one bonus chapter for every 10 reviews. Leave a review/comment. One bonus chapter will be released for every 100. Power Stones. Read 80-100 chapters ahead on P at Trian. Chapter 490. Decision to confront Hanzo. Deep in the Land of Fire, inside a dense stretch of forest, stood a massive ancient tree. From the outside it looked ordinary, just another old tree among countless others. But the trunk was hollow. The hollow space had long since been turned into a hidden shelter. At the moment, 2 Konoha shinobi were waiting inside. The camouflage covering the opening suddenly lifted, and a third shinobi stepped in. "Any luck?" Hizashi asked, raising his head slightly. "The insects are dead," Shibi replied with obvious frustration. Hanzo was far too cautious. Every now and then he would remove his mask, and the breath he released carried deadly poison. Any parasites clinging to him would die almost immediately. The poison inside Hanzo's body came from the black salamander. Even the Konoha hospital kept records and samples of that toxin. In theory, with enough time, Shibi could breed insects that carried resistance to the poison, but that required several generations. That kind of work could not be done in a few weeks. He had never expected to face someone like Hanzo, so he had never prepared insects for this situation. Because of that, even when they managed to find Hanzo, they could never follow him for long. Hizashi's Byakugan could only see about 1 kilometer ahead, and it still had blind spots. 1 kilometer sounded impressive, but against someone who had mastered the body flicker technique, it meant almost nothing. Compared to Hanzo, the 3 of them simply were not fast enough. Even Sum's ninja dogs could only help so much. Scent could be hidden or deliberately disrupted, and more than once they had followed the wrong trail and completely lost him. The Aburame clan did have one other rare insect, the microaromatic beetle. It was so rare that the clan had almost stopped using it entirely. Its sense of smell was said to be hundreds of times stronger than a human's. If it caught a person's scent once, it could track that person across long distances without difficulty. As the next clan head, Shibi carried one with him. But rumors were still just rumors. Even if the beetle was incredibly sensitive, it still could not instantly locate someone moving as quickly as Hanzo. One moment he might be near the border, and the next he could already be deep inside the Land of Fire. Once the distance became too large, even the beetle would fail. Silence filled the hollow tree. The space was large enough to store supplies, and since discovering it, they had been using it as a temporary base. There was even a watermelon sitting in one corner. And another one. Sum scratched her dog behind the ears. It has already been a month. If we lose Hanzo again, we might not find him for another month. Hanzo never stayed in one place for long. If they lost him now, the chance of tracking him again would be extremely small. Sum's meaning was obvious. If they wanted to stop Hanzo, this was probably their last chance. If they hesitated again, Sakumo would not arrive in time. Stopping him meant facing a legend head-on. There was no need to explain how strong Hanzo was. During the Second Great Ninja War, he had defeated the 3 young Sannin, and allowed them to live. That alone was enough to show the gap between them. But fortunately, they did not need to defeat him. They only needed to delay him for 20 minutes. 20 minutes sounded short, but in a fight like that, it could also mean death. What do we do? Hizashi looked at Shibi. Shibi was the captain. The decision belonged to him. He adjusted his glasses slightly. His face remained calm, but inside, the situation was clear. If they delayed Hanzo, they might die. If they did not, Hanzo would continue attacking Konoha shinobi. Before this mission began, Hayashi had already said one thing very clearly. Only track Hanzo if you can do it safely. In other words, survival came first. If they lost Hanzo again, no one would blame them. This was a covert mission, not a suicide order. Shibi looked at Hizashi, whose expression remained calm, then at Sum, who was pretending to look relaxed while still stroking her dog. The 3 of them had not originally been teammates. Most of their former teammates had already died in the war, and they had only been grouped together recently. They did not talk much except Sum. Shibi and Hizashi were both naturally quiet people, while Sum liked talking even when no one answered. Because of that, she ended up becoming the one who kept the team together. It was a strange team, but their trust in each other was absolute. There is a high chance we die, Shibi said. Sum grinned. The 3 Sannin survived. Maybe we will too. Maybe we will even become famous after this. She paused, then added confidently, besides, I cannot die yet. I still have to become Hokage. This was the first time Hizashi and Shibi had heard her say that out loud. Of course. If I become Hokage, the first thing I will do is ban dog meat in Konoha. I will also make a special day for dogs. Every shinobi will have to raise one. The hollow tree fell silent again. Shibi turned to Hizashi. What about you? Do you have a wish? Hizashi touched the forehead protector on his head. Beneath it was the caged bird seal. I do not have one, he said quietly. If I must choose one, I want to decide how I die. Shibi let out a slow breath and stood up. Check your equipment, he said calmly. We are moving now. Chapter 491. For 91. Failed ambush against Hanzo 1308 words. Death was something every shinobi had to face sooner or later. When a war reached its peak, even the Kage could fall, so ordinary shinobi had no reason to believe they would survive. That was why the second Hokage had chosen to stay behind and cover the retreat. It was why the young Sannin once stood against Hanzo, and why the third Hokage had eventually used the Reaper Death Seal. The will of fire was not just empty words when the situation became desperate. A violent explosion suddenly erupted in the forest. Flames shot high into the sky, followed by a thunderous roar that shook the surrounding trees. Hanzo, who had been resting briefly before leaving, immediately stopped. Without hesitation, he turned and rushed toward the source of the explosion. His first thought was simple. Leaf Shinobi and Rain Shinobi were probably fighting. As the leader of Amigakure, there was no way he could ignore something like that. To him, it would only cost a few more minutes. If no one strong enough appeared, the battle would end in a one-sided massacre anyway. Cruel, perhaps, but that was the reality of war. Hanzo moved extremely fast, weaving through the forest while observing his surroundings. He paid close attention to every broken branch and disturbed patch of earth, trying to judge the strength of the enemy before even reaching the battlefield. But just before he arrived at the explosion site, he suddenly stopped. The sudden halt caused the thick tree trunk beneath his feet to tremble violently. A kunai shot toward him. Hanzo tilted his head slightly and avoided it with ease, but the explosive tag tied to the ring at the end of the kunai suddenly ignited. His eyes narrowed. He was about to use the body flicker technique to move away, but the moment he pushed off the tree trunk, his foot sank slightly. The entire surface of the trunk was covered with them. They clung tightly to his legs, slowing his movement just enough to interfere with the body flicker technique. Hanzo reacted instantly. He swung the kozurigama in his hand, smashing the kunai away together with the explosive tag. But right after that, a sharp whistling sound filled the air. In a hidden corner nearby, Inuzuka Gaku pulled a thin wire. Dozens of kunai shot toward Hanzo at the same time, each one carrying an explosive tag. In the blink of an eye, a net of explosive tags formed around him. The first kunai had only been a distraction. The insects were meant to restrict his movement, and the explosive tags were meant to finish the job. Hanzo immediately understood the entire plan. The coordination was impressive. Against most shinobi, this trap would have worked perfectly. But the next moment, a deep, beast-like roar echoed through the forest. The ground trembled heavily, as if a drum were being struck beneath the earth. A giant salamander suddenly burst out from underground. Its tongue shot forward like lightning, wrapped around Hanzo, and pulled him straight into its mouth. Before the rain of kunai could reach him, the salamander had already dived back underground. So that is the salamander, Shibi muttered from a tall tree, pushing his glasses slightly upward. A powerful summoning beast could greatly increase a shinobi's strength, and Hanzo's salamander was one of the most dangerous. It might not matter much against someone far stronger than him, but against ordinary shinobi, it was an overwhelming advantage. The explosive tags detonated one after another, but by the time the explosions finished, Hanzo had already reappeared in a safe area through the salamander. The giant creature quickly disappeared underground again. Hanzo glanced down at his legs. The insects that had clung to him had already died and fallen off like dust. They cannot withstand the poison, he said calmly. Before Hanzo could say anything else, Shibi had already moved. Hyuga Hizashi followed closely behind him. Hanzo gave a faint smile. With a simple movement, he unfastened the buckle on his mask and let it fall to the ground. The moment the distance between them shrank to only a few meters, he thrust the kozurigama into the ground and leapt forward. Shibi was fast, but Hanzo was even faster. His right foot struck the back of Shibi's neck with terrifying force. Shibi's body slammed into the ground instantly, only to turn into a swarm of insects that scattered in every direction. Insect clone, Hanzo muttered quietly. Hidden in the shadows, Shibi quickly formed hand seals. Parasitic destruction insect technique, swarm. Countless insects poured toward Hanzo like a black tide, surrounding him completely. At the same time, Hizashi rushed forward. A bagua pattern appeared beneath his feet, as chakra gathered in his palms. Gentle fist, 8 trigrams 128 palms. His palms struck forward one after another, aiming directly at Hanzo's chakra points. The Byakugan could see the meridian system clearly. As long as the gentle fist struck accurately, it could shut down the opponent's chakra completely. But Hanzo simply raised both arms and blocked the attack. With every movement he made, the insects that had surrounded him fell off his body one after another. Without the mask, every breath he released carried deadly poison. Shibi's insects could not endure it at all. The moment he came out of the salamander's mouth, Hanzo had already understood the situation. Shibi let out a quiet breath. He had not expected his weakness to be discovered so quickly. His strength relied almost entirely on his insects. If they could not approach the enemy, the rest of his abilities meant very little. At the same time, Hisashi tried to press forward again. His palm moved toward Hanzo's chest, attempting to send chakra directly into his meridians through the strike. But Hanzo remained completely calm. He stepped forward and swept his leg out, instantly disrupting the chakra gathered in Hisashi's hand. His fingers closed like claws and grabbed Hisashi's wrist tightly. "The Hyuga clan is nothing more than this," Hanzo said coldly. He pulled the chain of the Kozurigama. The weapon flew out of the ground and slammed hard into Hisashi's chest with the back of the blade. Hisashi's face turned pale, and he spat out a mouthful of blood immediately. Hanzo did not hesitate at all. He turned and struck again, sending Hisashi flying through the air like a leaf caught in a storm. Everything happened in less than a second. Just as Hanzo prepared to deliver the finishing blow, a black figure rushed toward him from deep inside the forest. Inuzuka Gaku and Kuramaru merged together, forming a two-headed wolf. Their spinning movement created a powerful tornado that crashed straight toward Hanzo. Hanzo flicked his fingers again. The chain of the Kozurigama tightened, and the blade swung in a wide arc directly into Gaku's path. Gaku twisted his body midair, narrowly avoiding the blade. He spun again, pushed off the ground with his toes, and leapt high before smashing down toward Hanzo with all his strength. Hanzo did not even bother trying to kill Hisashi anymore. With a body flicker, he disappeared instantly. But while still in the air, Gaku used a tree to change direction and charged toward Hanzo again. Hanzo's expression turned cold. After only a few moves, he was already tired of dealing with the Inuzuka clan's attacks. He slammed his hands onto the ground. Fire release, exploding flame formation. A large number of explosive tags suddenly appeared across the ground around him. The salamander swallowed him once again and disappeared underground. The next moment, the explosive tags covering more than 100 meters detonated at the same time, and the entire forest was swallowed by flames, including Shibi and the others. If you want to read more, check out my Patreon. com/_Zef chapter 492. Reinforcements arrive. The explosion tags ignited in a chain reaction, tongues of fire lighting up the battlefield as the balance between offense and defense flipped instantly. In the clash moments earlier, Shibi's team had been completely overwhelmed. Hanzo had suppressed all three of them with nothing but overwhelming taijutsu skill. Still, that alone did not fully describe his strength. His true expertise lay in both taijutsu and kenjutsu. Bathed in flickering firelight, Shibi formed hand seals once more. Secret technique, insect wall technique. A dense swarm of Kikeichu insects surged outward like a dark tide, surrounding him, and Inuzukatsum in multiple layers. From a distance, it resembled a massive cocoon. The insects spun rapidly, forming a powerful defensive barrier. At the same time, Hyuga Hisashi spread his arms, releasing chakra from every tenketsu point as his body spun at high speed. 8 trigrams palm revolving heaven. An explosion erupted immediately after, shaking the ground and tearing through the air. Shibi had underestimated the technique. The attack was not just explosive, it carried a burning effect that lingered and spread. Smoke filled the battlefield, slowly thinning as Hanzo's figure emerged from within. When the dust settled, only Hisashi remained standing. Shibi and Inuzukatsum lay motionless on the ground, their bodies scorched, their condition critical. Hisashi himself was heavily injured. Even with revolving heaven, he had not escaped unscathed. Still, he stepped forward, raising his right hand and positioning himself in front of his fallen comrades. There was no hesitation in him, no fear. Hanzo watched him with a faint look of admiration. Even enemies like this were worthy of respect. He smirked slightly. 2 of the 3 of you can live. Choose one. Hisashi did not respond. Instead, he thrust his palm forward, releasing a burst of chakra. 8 trigrams mountain crusher. Hanzo vanished with the body flicker technique. The ground where he had stood shattered instantly. Hisashi's condition made it impossible to land a hit. Still, he forced himself to gather chakra again. But Hanzo had already closed the distance. Using his left foot as a pivot, he twisted his body and delivered a powerful kick aimed at Hisashi's neck. Hisashi crossed his arms to block. The impact sent him flying backward, rolling across the ground for over 10 meters. His Hyuga robes were stained with dirt and blood as he struggled to stand again. He exhaled heavily, forcing down the blood rising in his throat. How long can you keep this up? A minute or maybe 10 seconds. Hanzo's voice carried clear impatience now. Receiving no answer, he lost interest. His hands moved through another set of seals. Fire release, great flame flower. 3 blazing fireballs shot forward like meteors, targeting Hisashi, Shibi, and Inazukatsum. Hisashi tried to move, but his body refused. He dropped to the ground, lifting his sleeve to wipe the blood from his face. 20 minutes, is it time? He murmured. At that exact moment, a sharp cry rang out from the sky. A metallic rumble followed as a massive iron gate descended from above, slamming into place in front of them. Ninja art, summoning technique, Rashomon. A giant hawk appeared in the sky, its cry echoing across the battlefield. Riding on it, a Konoha ninja dove down at high speed. A black figure leapt from above, landing atop the Rashomon gate. Without pausing, he stepped forward and dropped from the towering height. As he fell, his feet tapped lightly against the gate before he launched himself downward, sprinting along its vertical surface. Blue lightning flickered beneath his feet as chakra burst outward. His speed surged to an unbelievable level. That was Hanzo's first thought. But the moment the figure landed, he became even faster. His movements flowed in rapid succession, like flashes of light. In an instant, he closed the distance. Hanzo's aura tightened, his robes whipping violently in the wind pressure. Still, he did not retreat. Instead, he faced the incoming figure directly. With a flick of his wrist, the chain connected to his side snapped into his hand. He swung it forward with full force, the blade cutting through the air with overwhelming power. Hayashi did not change direction. He moved straight ahead. Raising a kunai, he met the attack head-on. The collision rang out sharply, sparks bursting into the air as the kunai shattered instantly. Hanzo pressed forward, but Hayashi had already prepared his next move. His free hand formed a swirling sphere of chakra. The attack collided directly with the scythe, releasing a sharp vibrating sound that pierced the air. Despite the Rasengan's destructive power, Hanzo's weapon remained intact. The clash slowed Hayashi slightly, but he had already closed the distance. He drove a punch straight toward Hanzo's chest. Hanzo reacted instantly, pulling back the chain. The scythe reversed direction, slicing toward Hayashi's back. Hayashi twisted his body to avoid the strike, then swept his leg low. Hanzo stepped back, lifting his foot to evade the sweep. Planting his palm on the ground, Hayashi flipped backward, then surged forward again. His fist tightened, carrying immense strength. At such close range, Hanzo could not bring his weapon back in time. He released the chain and answered with a punch of his own. The impact sent Hanzo flying backward like a broken kite. Without hesitation, Hayashi grabbed the chain midair and hurled it toward Hanzo's falling body. The speed tore through the air, producing a deafening sonic boom. Chapter 493, 493, Hanzo's Fire Technique. 1094 words. When Hisashi saw who had arrived, the last of his strength finally gave out, and he collapsed backward. His body was drenched in blood. His clothes were torn apart, and wounds covered him from head to toe. His vision had long since blurred, yet he forced his eyes to remain open. Through that fading awareness, he thought he saw his younger sister, Himeji, her face streaked with tears. Himeji rarely cried. The memory that stood out most was from the night before he received the caged bird seal. The usually stubborn girl had gone to plead with their father, refusing to accept it. It had been useless. In his dazed state, Hisashi realized that more than 10 years had passed since then. Time had slipped away without him noticing. When he first learned of the caged bird seal, it had felt as though his entire world had collapsed. Death had never frightened him. What troubled him was how deeply Himeji would grieve after he was gone. That foolish little sister. He tried to speak, but only blood bubbled from his lips. Yet, for the first time, Hisashi felt a strange sense of relief. At last, he could choose how he died. He slowly closed his eyes. Death felt no different from sleep, a quiet rest that no one could disturb. Then, faintly, he heard a familiar voice. "How is he?" The voice belonged to Hayashi. In his half-conscious state, Hisashi also heard Nono speaking calmly. "The injuries are severe, but I'm here, so he will survive." Hisashi wanted to open his eyes and argue, but recalling that she was Tsunade's disciple, he gave up and sank into complete darkness. "I need to operate immediately," Nono said, her hands glowing with the green chakra of medical ninjutsu. Her meaning was clear. Hayashi nodded. "Hanzo is mine." His tone was calm, as if he were speaking about something insignificant. None of the Konoha ninja present questioned him. Hayashi had already proven his strength many times over. His record on the battlefield had earned him unwavering trust. Turning away, Hayashi began to walk forward. At first, his steps were steady and unhurried. Then they grew faster, building rhythm and momentum. In an instant, his figure vanished from sight. Not far away, Hanzo stood at the edge of a crater, lost in thought after being sent flying. He recalled the first powerful ninja he had killed, the former leader of the Land of Rain, the man who had implanted the venom sac within him. Hanzo had not wanted to kill him, but weakness had no place in a world dominated by great nations. He had come to believe that he was the savior of the Land of Rain. With that conviction, he united its forces and rose to power, earning followers and carving his name into the world. Confident and relentless, he had fought against the Hokage and Kazekage, gaining the title of a demigod. Over the years, countless ninja and samurai had tried to take his life. Most had fallen before him, far weaker than Shibi's team. Among those memories, one battle stood out. The three young ninja of Konoha, later known as the legendary Sannin. Each had possessed extraordinary ability, yet even together, they had been suppressed by him. Time had passed quickly. Now, standing before him was the disciple of one of those Sannin, Orochimaru. Fate had a strange way of circling back. Hanzo's thoughts lasted only a moment. Hayashi's chakra was already approaching at an incredible speed. He had expected this encounter to happen later, but now Konoha's famed lightning flash stood before him. The chain-linked sickle weapon rotated slowly around Hanzo, as he reached into a scroll, and pulled out a mask, fastening it securely over his face. The venom sac within his body was both a weapon and a weakness. If ruptured, even he would be affected by the toxin. Very few knew this secret. But against a powerful opponent, even a small mistake could be fatal. Hanzo stepped forward. If one advanced, the other would respond. One would live, the other would die. It was that simple. He did not rush in immediately. The earlier exchange had already shown that he was outmatched in taijutsu. It had nothing to do with age. Though past 50, he had only lost some stamina. The difference in skill was undeniable. Hayashi's combat style was already well known across the battlefield, especially his sage mode, marked by dark patterns. No one knew how that information had spread, but its effect was clear. Enhanced strength, speed, and perception. Combined with overwhelming physical power, very few could match him in close combat. In a blink, the distance between them vanished. Hanzo formed hand seals. Fire release, dragon flame bomb. A massive fireball surged forward. Hayashi, already in sage mode, showed a faint smirk. To use fire release in front of the Uchiha clan, that takes confidence. He formed the tiger seal. Sage art, fire release, dragon flame bomb. A far more intense wave of flames erupted, swallowing Hanzo's attack instantly. The heat distorted the air itself. Before the flames could settle, a monstrous roar echoed. A giant salamander burst from the ground, its jaws snapping toward Hayashi. A moment earlier, Hayashi had already leapt into the air. Even from above, he could smell the thick poison emanating from its mouth. Fortunately, he had already taken an antidote. The salamander roared again. Its long tongue shot forward, slicing through the poison cloud and wrapping tightly around Hayashi's legs. The poison had only been a distraction. Hayashi reacted instantly, thrusting his right hand downward. Lightning crackled as the Chidori sharp spear extended. At the same time, Hanzo seized the opening, charging forward while pulling his chained weapon through the air. Forced into defense, Hayashi launched the Chidori sharp spear while forming another lightning blade in his left hand. Before he could follow up, the salamander's tongue whipped violently, flinging him far across the battlefield. Twisting his body midair, Hayashi landed and slid across the ground, immediately counterattacking with another Chidori sharp spear aimed at the creature. But the salamander moved with surprising agility. Despite its massive size, it twisted and burrowed back into the ground with ease, disappearing as if it had returned to water. Clearly, its enormous body did nothing to slow it down. I'll drop one bonus chapter for every 10 reviews. Leave a review/comment. One bonus chapter will be released for every 100 power stones. Read 80-100 chapters ahead on Patreon. Chapter 494, Destroying the Salamander. 1034 words. Hayashi would never allow the massive salamander to escape. Without hesitation, he slammed his palm against the ground. The earth trembled violently as chakra surged outward. Sage Art, Earth Release, Moving Earth Core. The terrain shifted instantly. The ground rose into a towering, smooth cliff dozens of meters high, forcing everything in the area upward. The salamander clung to the cliffside, letting out a furious roar. Its long tongue lashed out again, shooting straight toward Hayashi's chest with terrifying speed. Hayashi moved only slightly, stepping aside with precise timing. The attack missed him completely, crashing into the ground and blasting a massive crater. His expression remained calm. He reached out and grabbed the creature's tongue. Lightning flickered in his palm, crackling softly. This was not meant to kill. The lightning release was controlled, just enough to paralyze the salamander and strip it of movement. He released the limp tongue, then gathered chakra again. This time, he intended to end it. Sage Art, Lightning Release, Chidori Sharp Spear. The spear shot forward in complete silence. There was no sound, no warning, only a streak of deadly lightning. In the next instant, the salamander was pinned to the cliff like an insect. Its massive body twitched once, then went completely still. Everything had happened in the blink of an eye. The moving earth core had not only exposed the salamander, it had also cut Hanzo off from assisting it. There had been no time to react. Impossible. Hanzo felt it immediately through their contract. His summoned beast was gone. Not injured, not struggling, but completely erased in a single exchange. The bond they shared was not something ordinary people could understand. The salamander had been his most trusted companion for years. And now it was gone. Hanzo's expression darkened, his eyes turning cold with a hint of madness. His hands moved rapidly through hand seals. Water release, exploding water colliding wave. He inhaled deeply, then expelled an enormous volume of water. It surged forward like a flood, cascading down the cliff and spreading outward until a lake formed beneath them. Hayashi lightly stepped forward, landing on the water's surface with ease. Hanzo was not limited to poison or summoning. In the land of rain, water release was naturally advantageous, and he had clearly mastered it. Hayashi was not surprised. So he is trying to suppress my fire release and fight on his terms. Unfortunately for Hanzo, Hayashi had no such weakness. He was proficient in all 5 chakra natures. Hanzo leapt down from the elevated terrain, gripping his chained scythe. He dashed across the water, his weapon swinging outward in a wide arc like a scorpion's tail. Wind-release chakra extended from the blade, forming a massive cutting edge that distorted the air. Hayashi jumped upward and slid backward across the surface. The scythe struck the water with explosive force, splitting it apart as if dividing north from south. Hayashi narrowed his eyes slightly. He had seen a similar level of cutting power from Tsukumo. A direct hit would be fatal, even with his recovery ability. Hanzo pressed forward relentlessly. His speed increased, giving Hayashi no time to counter. The scythe swept again. The assault was sharp, continuous, and merciless. Hayashi retreated step by step as the water beneath them exploded into waves. Hanzo's weapon control was flawless, using the chain to restrict movement while the blade struck with lethal precision. For dozens of seconds, the battlefield shifted across the lake. Water sprayed into the air like heavy rain. Finally, Hayashi reached the edge of the lake. There was nowhere left to retreat. He clenched his fist and struck forward. Sage art, snake style. A deep impact echoed across the water. Hanzo's attack stopped abruptly, just centimeters away from Hayashi's arm, blocked by an invisible force. Before Hanzo could react, Hayashi threw another punch. This time, the scythe visibly bent under the pressure. Hanzo stared at the distorted weapon, then back at Hayashi. Fear began to surface in his eyes. What kind of power was this? Hayashi did not answer. He reached forward with his left hand and grabbed the chain. Hanzo pulled back but refused to release it. For a moment, both of them held opposite ends. Then Hayashi struck again, drawing in natural energy for a heavier blow. Sage art, snake style, monstrous strength. The chain snapped instantly. Hanzo's eyes widened in shock. He had not expected his weapon to break so easily. Still holding the broken end, he swung the weighted section toward Hayashi. Hayashi released the chain. A swirling blue sphere formed in his palm, blocking the strike effortlessly. Then it grew. In an instant, the Rasengan expanded into a massive sphere as large as a 2-story structure. Sage art, big ball Rasengan. With overwhelming force, Hayashi drove it downward. The impact was explosive. Hanzo was slammed straight into the water, his body disappearing beneath the surface as a massive wave erupted outward. Water surged high into the air before crashing back down. Without waiting, Hayashi formed hand seals the moment his feet touched the water. Chakra surged outward. A water dragon rose from the surface, coiling in the air. Then another. And another. Soon, 6 massive water dragons hovered above the lake, roaring with power. Sage art, water release, multiple water dragon bullets. All 6 dragons plunged downward at once. The water exploded with a series of heavy, muffled impacts. Moments later, Hanzo resurfaced. Blood trailed from the corner of his mouth. His gray armor was cracked in multiple places, barely holding together. For the first time in his life, fear truly took hold. He could feel death approaching. Without hesitation, he turned and attempted to retreat. But he was too slow. Hayashi moved faster. As Hayashi threw a punch, the surrounding natural energy gathered around his fist. Hanzo raised an arm across his chest in defense. A sharp cracking sound echoed. Then a powerful impact followed. Hanzo's body was launched backward, flying across the lake before crashing violently into the cliff created earlier. The rock shattered on impact, leaving a massive indentation. His body hung there, embedded deep within the stone. Like a grave waiting to be sealed. Chapter 495. Hayashi captures Hanzo. The seemingly decisive punch had embedded Hanzo deep into the earthen wall, but at the final moment, Hayashi pulled back his strength. If he had not, a strike empowered by snake style and monstrous strength would not have resulted in just a broken arm. Hanzo would have been torn apart instantly. That did not mean Hayashi had been holding back throughout the entire fight. Doing so against someone like Hanzo would not be confidence, it would be arrogance. Hanzo was far from weak. He had survived and fought across the ninja world for decades, building experience that few could match. The issue was that his greatest strengths had all been countered. His body flicker technique, his mastery of kenjutsu, and most importantly, his salamander. The antidote prepared by Nono had already weakened the salamander significantly. Combined with Hayashi's sage mode perception, its position had been exposed and eliminated in a single decisive strike. One of Hanzo's strongest advantages had been removed instantly. As for kenjutsu, Hayashi had sparred with Tsukumo countless times. He was already familiar with that style of combat. With Sage Mode enhancing both perception and power, Hayashi held a clear advantage in both taijutsu and ninjutsu. When every advantage is stripped away, there is little left to rely on. For the first time, Hanzo experienced what it meant to be completely suppressed in battle. Hayashi stepped forward slowly, each step sending ripples across the water's surface. Without chakra sustaining it, the lake gradually began to recede. By the time he reached the cliff formed by earth release, most of the water had already drained away. He continued upward along the steep wall at the same calm pace. From within a hollow in the rock, a faint sound echoed. A thin stream of blood trickled down from the crater above. Hayashi leapt up and landed inside. Hanzo was stuck headfirst in the ground, his body twisted awkwardly, completely defenseless. Raising his hand, Hayashi summoned a python. It shot forward instantly, wrapping around Hanzo's legs before pulling him out of the ground. Despite his condition, Hanzo still resisted. Using his uninjured arm, he swung toward Hayashi in a final attempt to fight back. Hayashi tilted his head slightly, easily avoiding the attack. With a sharp motion, he swung the python, flinging Hanzo out of the crater and onto the muddy ground below. In the next instant, Hayashi appeared beside him and grabbed him by the neck. His grip tightened. For a brief moment, killing intent surfaced. Then it disappeared. A living Hanzo was far more valuable than a dead one. The reasoning was simple. During the previous war, when the third Kazekage had been captured, he was kept alive rather than killed. If he had been executed, Tsunegakure would have continued fighting without restraint, prolonging the war. Instead, he became leverage. The same principle applied here. The living hold value. The dead do not. Ninja do not kill simply for the sake of killing. Every action serves a purpose. Right now, Konoha's greatest priority was ending the war as quickly as possible. The sooner it ended, the fewer lives would be lost. Before this battle had even begun, orders had already been issued. Hanzo must not be killed. The defeat of the Land of Rain was inevitable. The question was what came after. Hanzo was the pillar holding the country together. Without him, the Land of Rain would collapse into chaos overnight. No shinobi within the country had the strength or authority to replace him. Internal conflict would erupt immediately, with factions fighting for control. That instability would not benefit Konoha. Their strategy required the Land of Rain to remain intact. Whether advancing toward the Land of Wind or moving north toward the Land of Earth, the region would serve as a crucial position in the war. It could become a staging ground, even a supply route. If Hanzo died and the country fractured, maintaining control of that territory would become nearly impossible. Additionally, Hanzo commanded deep loyalty. Without him to restrain his followers, resistance against Konoha would only intensify, threatening supply lines and future operations. Because of this, Hanzo could not die. At least, not yet. Of course, if the situation had been different, Hayashi would not have hesitated. If allies had fallen here today, he would have ended Hanzo without a second thought. Hayashi formed hand seals once more. Chakra gathered at his fingertips as he pressed his hand against Hanzo's shoulder. Dark sealing marks spread instantly across his body. His chakra flow was locked. Hanzo was completely immobilized. Hayashi lifted him onto his shoulder, preparing to leave. Then his gaze shifted. In the distance lay the charred remains of the salamander. Originally, he had not intended to kill it. With enough control, even powerful creatures could be subdued. But the salamander's vision had already deteriorated to the point where it relied on other senses. That made control techniques ineffective. Still, even in death, it had some use. Hayashi paused, placing a hand over his stomach. He had not eaten all day. Hunger was unavoidable. Rations could sustain him, but they were hardly satisfying. He glanced at the massive corpse again. Then he walked over and sealed it into a storage scroll. He let out a quiet breath. I did not plan to eat you, but it is a waste to leave you behind. Maybe you will still be useful someday. With that, Hayashi picked up Hanzo once more and prepared to depart the battlefield. I'll drop one bonus chapter for every 10 reviews. Leave a review/comment. One bonus chapter will be released for every 100 power stones. Read 80-100 chapters ahead on P at Trian. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Novels Wonderland.